This is my local ecosystem project. Before we get started with anything else, we do have a few things to go over. So first, we're going to go over the ecology vocabulary. So first, we're going to start with primary consumers. So examples would include squirrels or small fish. They are usually herbivores. They feed directly on the primary producers such as plants and algae. They occupy the second trophic level in a food chain, and they serve as like a key link between the producers and the higher level consumers. Next, we're going to be talking about the secondary consumers. Some examples would be small fish or snakes. These specific organisms feed on primary consumers and are usually carnivores or omnivores. They occupy the third trophic level. Next, we're going to be talking about the tertiary consumers. The tertiary consumers are often predators. They'll feed on both the primary and secondary consumers. So usually they're at the top of the food chain, so they can either be carnivores or omnivores, but examples would include large birds such as hawks or large fish. Next is the decomposers. So some examples would be bacteria, fungi, or aquatic worms. They break down the dead organic material and they recycle nutrients back into the ecosystem. Since they do a lot of nutrient cycling, they often interact with the detrivores and they feed on the decomposing matter. And so examples of the detrivores would be the earthworms or snails. So they would consume the organic waste and dead material. So the decomposers and the detrivores kind of work hand in hand. They complement the decomposers by physically breaking down the material and the microbial decomposition. In this next slide, we're going to be talking about the difference between the intraspecific and the interspecific competitions. So an example for the intraspecific would be two male ducks fighting each other for mating rights, and the definition would be the interactions occurring between individuals of the same species. And then with interspecific, that would be a hawk and a different large bird competing for the same prey. So with this specifically, it's going to be interactions occurring between individuals of different species. And these definitions are given to me from the Chandler Gilbert Community College Biology 182. In this next slide with the energy biomass pyramid, producers are going to be at the base of the pyramid because they capture and they store the largest amount of energy. And the primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers, they occupy higher levels with decreasing biomass at each step. So with this energy biomass pyramid, I place the producers at the base of the pyramid because the biomass of the producers is the greatest. They provide the energy directly to all of the other trophic levels. Above the producers is going to be the primary consumers. They're placed at second above the producers because they gain energy from consuming the producers, but only a fraction of this energy is converted into biomass due to the energy loss in the metabolism and the heat dissipation. And this explains why the biomass at each level is smaller than the level before. At the third level is the secondary consumers. The energy is going to continue to decrease as it's transferred up the pyramid, and only about 10% of the energy at the primary consumer level is available to secondary consumers, which means even less biomass. At the top level is going to be the tertiary consumers because they are predators and they feed on the secondary consumers. Energy at this level is the smallest compared to all of the other levels. Since they're at the top of the pyramid, this means that they have the smallest biomass, and each level energy is lost because of heat waste and through the metabolic processes of the food chain. In this next slide is an aerial view of the area that I'll be looking at. The area I'll be looking at is circled to the right, and with the abiotic components of this area, the first question is about the water source of this place. So it's not natural, it is man-made, and the amount of sunlight this area receives is pretty direct. It's not shaded. There are trees, but they only cover what's underneath them. So for the most part, it's always in sunlight. And there is a large amount of foot traffic because the area around where I am going to be looking at, it has walkways, and the walkways are made of concrete. And it's the only place where it is rocky is towards the water. But that's not, you're not supposed to be walking on that part of the ecosystem. And these abiotic factors affect the components of this ecosystem. And the abiotic factor of sunlight affects this area because it does provide energy that allows plants to utilize and grow, but also a little bit negatively because there is not a lot of shade, and so the organisms living in the area have to go out of their way to find shade in a spot that might not be familiar to them. So in this slide, it shows a picture of the green heron. This animal is a vertebrate. Like all birds and the green heron, they possess the characteristic of having a backbone. The evidence will include the backbone/spinal column. The birds have an endoskeleton and a spine made of vertebrae. They also have a nerve cord and the notochord, and birds develop this during embryonic development. They also have wings and legs and the complex nervous system and a closed circulatory system, which are all characteristics of having a vertebrae. The green heron belongs to phylum Chordata, and it's classified because of the following characteristics, which include having the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the presence of the notochord, and the pharyngeal slits or pouches, and the postanal tail. And with the question of what kind of diet that the green heron has, it is a carnivore, so it consists of small animals, including fish, some small tadpoles, crayfish, dragonflies, beetles. Some of the feeding adaptations that the green heron utilize are its sharp beak. It uses its beak to catch small aquatic prey like fish or insects. A hunting technique that they use is stealthy behavior, so they'll stand motionless or move slowly to avoid startling prey. And for the locomotion adaptations, they have their flight, which includes just their wings. They have specialized toes and long legs for wading, so the legs will just allow the heron to go through shallow water while searching for food, and their wings are strong and they're pretty quick, so they can do direct flight over a short distance. The bluegill is a vertebrate. It belongs to the group of animals that have a backbone, and this group is its phylum Chordata, and that includes all vertebrates. So some characteristics proving that this animal belongs to this phylum is the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the pharyngeal slits, the endoskeleton, postanal tail, and the notochord. And some characteristics that are used for the identification to prove that it is a vertebrate is the complex nervous system that it has, the gill structures. So they have gills for breathing, which are covered by a bony operculum. The paired fins, these are the appendages that aid the fish in swimming. And the backbone, the bluegill has a bony spine, and that will support its body and it protects the spinal cord. Next, the feeding adaptations of this bluegill include the small sharp teeth. These are ideal for tearing aquatic insects, smaller prey, or grasping prey. They also have the protrusible mouth. It allows the fish to extend its mouth forward to suction the prey. And the bluegill is an omnivore, so it feeds on a variety of food sources, including plants and small animals. The locomotive adaptations of the bluegill include the caudal fin, the paired pectoral and pelvic fins. So the pectoral and pelvic fins allow control in the waters, and that's useful for hunting for food or navigation. And the caudal fin is good for helping the bluegill swim faster to either avoid predators or to catch prey. Its behavioral adaptations that involve the territoriality and schooling, it helps survive in freshwater habitats. For this crawfish in this next slide, it is an invertebrate in phylum Arthropoda. Its diet is feeding on plants and small animals, so it's an omnivore. And the reproductive strategy, it has external fertilization, and it is maternally caring for eggs. Some of the key features are its exoskeleton, jointed appendages, the segmented body, and the omnivorous feeding habit. Some characteristics that are used for the identification of its phylum are the exoskeleton, the segmented body, the jointed appendages, and the bilateral symmetry. Those same characteristics are also used for the identification because it is the invertebrate, but also it does not have a vertebral column. This American century plant is classified as an angiosperm because it produces flowers and seeds enclosed in fruit. Since it's an angiosperm, it's also characterized as a monocot because of the leaf venation. It has parallel leaf veins, and that's typical of monocots. And the flower parts are usually arranged in multiples of threes, which is also a common feature. And it has thicker, fleshy leaves that are adapted to store water, making it drought resistant. On this next slide, we're going to be looking at another plant. So this one is also an angiosperm and is classified as a monocot. And this plant also has the parallel leaf veins, but it has fibrous root systems, and the flower parts are arranged in multiples of three as well. In this slide, this next plant we're going to be looking at is also classified as an angiosperm. Some traits that characterize it in that way are its ability to produce seeds that are enclosed in a covering, and it produces flowers. And based on its structural characteristics, this plant is also characterized as a monocot. So it's because the leaf venation, it has the parallel leaf veins, that's typical of monocots, and it has those flower parts, which are usually arranged in threes. So this is my biomass pyramid of all of the organisms that I found at the park that I decided to look at. The plants are going to be the producers because they are the primary source of energy for all of the other organisms. So without producers, energy would not flow up the pyramid. Next are going to be the bluegill and the crawfish as secondary consumers. They are secondary consumers because they feed on primary consumers, herbivores. The bluegill will eat smaller organisms, and the crawfish also eats on dead material and plant matter. But both of these organisms take up the middle tier because they rely on energy obtained indirectly from plants and then through the primary consumers. And lastly, I put the green heron at the top as the tertiary consumer because it feeds on secondary consumers, so it occupies a higher level on the biomass pyramid. The green heron preys on secondary consumers like the crawfish and bluegill and any other small fish or amphibians.